It's an honor that the Strand has been chosen to host the prestigious Alice Award for the 5th consecutive year. I'm Nancy Bass-Wyden. I'm the third generation owner of the Strand bookstore here in New York City. The store has been in my family for nearly 100 years. Joan Davidson is the founder of the award in devotion to her mother, Alice. She's been a fixture in New York City political, civic, and charitable world. She has used her smarts, her enthusiasm, her ideas, and generosity to make New York City a better place.
Welcome, everybody, to the 9th Alice Award. I wish we were all together to celebrate it tonight, but wherever you are, I'm warmly welcoming you to the event. I wish we could be here in the marvelous rare book room of our beloved Strand. So grateful to Nancy Bass for always inviting us to use her wonderful space. It's not an ordinary thing when something that starts from scratch, before 10 years are over, has really become a fixture on the landscape, I think, of publishing and books and literature and civilization. And we are very proud of it. And what I want to do is just thank the people who have been so essential to building this program. And first is Anne Berkmeyer, who has run it. She is the entire staff of both Furthermore and the Alice program. Elizabeth Howard has been wonderful in managing the Alice and planning and organizing it and doing everything that is connected with the Alice. As you know, you've all met her. And my colleagues at the Kaplan Fund have just been terrific. Amy Freitag has been so helpful, as has the staff and all the trustees. You will hear from Jock Reynolds talk about important people. Jock has been the chairman of the jury the whole way since we started. Brilliantly ran the Yale Art Gallery forever. Jock has been our steady chairman all the way, and he has really built it and established the standards and brought people in and always manages to resolve discussions about books. He somehow diplomatically pulls it together so we end up with a unanimous choice. And that has been a fantastic service. We're looking forward to the day when we can all meet again together and shuffle through books together and comment and pass them on and recommend new ones. And I think what we are most pleased about at the Alice is that we have been able to give help to all aspects of the industry. Yes, to the writers, but also to the illustrators, to the designers, to the editors, to the publishers, seeing the book as a complicated mixture of all these talents. And we think they all should be celebrated. The book remains essential to us and to the civilized world, and we are happy that Alice is able to help in its modest way. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jock Reynolds. I'm the recently retired director of the Yale University Art Gallery, and I'm here tonight for the 9th announcement of the Alice Book Awards. This is a wonderful award that Joan Davidson made popular and possible in honor of her wonderful mother, Alice, and invited me 9 years ago to head up a jury that would look at some of the finest books that have been printed and illustrated in this country. I'm happy tonight to introduce a panel of what I call my peers, the other people who join me every year when we look at a small group of books that have been culled from a great many to consider for this wonderful award.
It doesn't cost any more to design a good book than a bad book.
Yeah.
Or to typeset a good book than a bad book, or to print a good book than I mean, why not do it right if you're going to do it at all?
One works very hard on published books that accompany exhibitions. There are so many challenges in creating an illustrated book, and to be recognized for producing something that people approve of was really wonderful.
Illustrated books are a meaningful element of our cultural heritage, and they are also deeply important to the American Federation of Arts. The catalogs we produce about art and the lives of artists have an impact that exists well beyond the finite life of the originating exhibition.
It's not only people who care about the art of the book and the well-made book, but it's people who care about, what an illustrated book and text together can do, the kind of transformative power it can have to change the way we look at things and look at the world. And there are more than a few books out there that do that.
It's a place where the quality of book production, both in terms of content and in terms of style, is truly honored. I don't think there is a more important moment for the kinds of honor that the Alice provides than this, as we, coming out of the pandemic, begin to think about how we deliver books in the future.
The focus is on the look of a book, the excitement of the graphics, things that are somewhat taken for granted that shouldn't be. How does the type work? How does the type supplement and enlarge upon the text?
It's a wonderful group, and I have to say, when we get together, we've never had a fight yet over what we should do and recommend. We are very collegial as a group. We love the time we spend together. Each of us has contributions and comments to make, and every year we come up with a short list and an Alice Award book. The first one is The Art of Winold Reiss, an immigrant modernist. This was produced by the New York Historical Society and is a truly remarkable compendium of the work he did throughout this whole country. If you've never seen his work before, it's underknown, and this book's going to bring it to the great recognition it fully deserves. Next to it is E. McKnight's Kaufer, The Artist in American Advertising. This was a book and also produced here in New York at the Cooper Hewitt, and it documents the great role that artists have had in modern advertising. All kinds of fabulous posters are reproduced in lush, full color throughout this book, along with great text, putting them in their proper context. On the far right, we have an amazing book called Printing the Revolution, The Rise and Impact of Chicano Graphics, 1965 to Now. This book particularly interested me because I grew up in San Francisco at that time when Chicano art was really coming of age, and I knew a lot of the artists in this book, but I was just amazed by the breadth of material I'd never seen before. This brings a full scope of that to the national audience, and it was produced by our wonderful Smithsonian American Art Museum in the nation's capital. Now we're going to have the representatives receiving the awards for those books come and say a few words to each of you.
The Art of Winold Reiss, an immigrant modernist, illuminates this underappreciated figure, utilizing our extensive historical collections to situate him in both New York and broader American art history. Reiss's story confounds easy definition. A German immigrant whose primary grounding lay in modern German art, yet whose corpus occupied prominent spaces in the American mainstream and concerned itself with decidedly American social and historical themes. Shepherding this catalog about the work of Winold Reiss has been one of the highlights of my career. Combing through his archives containing his artworks, letters, his musings, and articles written about him has been an experience that I will savor. I feel quite fortunate to be in a profession that offers that interchange of ideas and, as well, an opportunity to share them with the public. This venture could not have been done without the fine work that predates our endeavor, as well as the terrific team that we had working on the project. I want to say thank you to all of them. Very importantly, I would like to thank Joan Davidson, furthermore, and the Alice for their recognition of our efforts to bring this very exciting story to the fore. The honor of becoming an Alice finalist is quite special indeed.
Welcome to Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. My name is Emily Orr. I'm the Assistant Curator of Modern and Contemporary American Design. And I'm Caitlin Condell, Associate Curator and Head of Drawings, Prints, and Graphic Design. Our thanks to Joan Davidson and the jury for selecting our publication E. McKnight Kauffer, The Artist in Advertising, for the 2021 Alice Award shortlist.
We truly could not be in better company and are inspired by our fellow finalists. It is an honor to be recognized by Furthermore, and we are deeply grateful for their ongoing support, continuing the important role that Alice Kaplan played in the history of Cooper Hewitt.
Printing the Revolution, The Rise and Impact of Chicano Graphics, 1965 to Now, is a groundbreaking exhibition for the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Curated by Dr. E. Carmen Ramos, this exhibition showcases the multi-generational history of Chicano graphics from the 1960s to today, examining the innovative printmaking practices of Chicanx artists and their ongoing efforts for social justice. We unveiled the exhibition in our Washington, D.C. galleries, and currently the show is on a national tour at select venues. We are grateful to Joan Davidson and the Furthermore Grants in Publishing for recognizing the exhibition catalog that remains a lasting record of cutting-edge, vital scholarship and a visual recognition of our robust, permanent collection of Chicano graphics. We are honored to have been nominated for the Alice Award. On behalf of Stephanie Stevish, the Margaret and Terry Stent Director of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, we thank you for the acknowledgement and congratulate the other deserving nominees.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce this year's Alice Award winner. It's a remarkable book, and it's titled Strata, William Smith's Geological Maps, with a foreword by Robert McFarland, and it was published by the University of Chicago Press.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Karen Darling and I'm acquiring editor at the University of Chicago Press. It is my distinct pleasure to accept the 2021 Alice Award on behalf of the press and everyone whose hard work made Strata the beautiful book that you have before you. So thank you very much, and over to Rob and Tristan.
Okay, greetings from Deptford in southeast London. That's the place of Christopher Marlowe's Last Jug of Ale and the most notorious gig the Sultans of Swing ever did. My name's Tristan Delancey. I am the head of illustrated reference at Thames and Hudson in the UK. We are the co-publishers of Strata.
I'm Robert McFarlane. I'm a writer and an academic with a particular interest in people and place and landscape. And I wrote the foreword to Strata. I'm speaking to you from South Cambridge, and I am on 99 million year old Upper Cretaceous chalk, which shows up as green in William Smith's wonderful 1815 geological map, which is the subject of Strata and what we're here to celebrate today.
When I came across William Smith's, the delineation map, the 15-plate map, I was blown away. I saw that for the first time at the Geological Society. I'm sure Robert saw the same at some point.
Yep.
And was really blown away by the scale, the detail, and then putting into context, this is the birth of the Industrial Revolution, and we are for the first time looking at a very, very exciting map where what lies beneath the ground is suddenly something that can be mined for technology and for use and even for wealth.
Smith's map now exists somewhere between artwork, dreamwork, and dataset. It gives its readers trilobite eyes, allowing them to see back into ancient Earth history and glimpse something of how profoundly this buried past shapes the surface world. It reminds us, humblingly, of the inhumanly long periods of geological time, which extend both behind and ahead of the present moment, and which our imaginations still find so hard to grasp or to conjure. We live in a geological epoch which is being increasingly referred to as the Anthropocene, the age of humans, or technically the age of man. That hasn't yet been endorsed by the stratigraphers, the current body that endorses a new geological epoch. But I think it soon will be. It's a much contested term. It's proposed and is likely to be endorsed because what it names is the fact that human beings have become the predominant earth-shaping species, and they will leave a legacy in the strata that will be legible for millions of years to come. There are many good political objections to this idea, including the fact that it generalizes, as it were, blame for planetary change across a species, when in fact it's arguably a system, capitalism, and certainly certain groups of people that are more responsible and others that are more vulnerable to these changes. But it asks a big question, which is, how will our strata be read? Smith looked back and he dated the strata from those wonderful cake slices. This was one of his great realizations, is that fossils could help us date the sequence of strata. Well, what will our fossils be? What will our future remains be if a geologist like Smith were working on our epoch millions of years hence? What would be our strata markers? Some of them would be pig bones, probably. There's a huge concentration of biomass in sheep, in pigs, in chicken, in cattle. Those will probably survive. Our cities will have become rubble. There will be radionuclides from the mass use of nuclear weapons and nuclear power arising just after the end of the Second World War. There will be absences, things that are missing, soil where it should be, species where there should be more of them. And I think so strata and their reading are, it's a kind of ethical work as well as an instrumental, a geological work. And I love the fact that in that sense, to me, Smith's map looks back at us and it asks questions of our now and of our future. So although you have made this beautiful book, which has its feet billions of years ago and much of its body in the early 19th century, I found this when I met it to be a searching book that asks questions of us now as well. So speaking in my part, I'm absolutely thrilled to see your work and the work of all those involved in Strata celebrated by this award. And I'll just hand over to you for any final thoughts, Tristram, but many, many congratulations to you and your team on both sides of the Atlantic.
Well, thank you, Robert. Obviously, we were delighted that our plan A came into being, which was to ask Robert McFarlane to do the foreword. And I'm very glad that we didn't have a plan B, because you obviously jumped at the chance. To be honest, it was, we're very proud of the book. Everybody in my team, certainly across the pond, at Chicago, very proud, and the contributors. You know, we absolutely could not have made this book without the excellent reputation and knowledge of the contributors. So I think really, you know, in all of this, my great thanks goes to them. And I'm glad that we were able to package it in a way that has pleased so many people, including yourself.
All right. Well, thanks everybody who's been listening, and goodbye from us both.
Goodbye.
I'm Ian Wardropper, the Anna Marie and Stephen Kellen Director of the Frick Collection. I have the honor of stepping in as chair of the Alice jury next year, a jury of peers, the words Jock Reynolds used earlier in introducing us. I've served on it for several years and come to relish the lively discussions among a group of individuals representing a wide range of expertise around the subject of illustrated books. Jock's guidance will be felt well into the future when next year, in 2022, we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Alice. I'm glad to say that he will continue as chair emeritus. When I first became a museum director 10 years ago, the Association of Art Museum Directors assigned Jock as my mentor. He walked into my rather grand office at the Frick, looked around and said, "I can't teach you anything." He then sat down and proceeded to give me an hour of the best advice on being a museum director that I ever had. I hope that his advice on chairing the Alice jury will set me on the right course once again. Behind me, you can see Veronese's painting, The Choice Between Virtue and Vice. Jock is guiding me to choose virtue, but knowing about vice is always a good thing too. Next year, on the occasion of the 10th anniversary, we fully expect to be together in person so that you can touch and feel the books, greet the jury members, and meet the writers, designers, illustrators, and publishers of these beautiful books. books that record our cultural history. I encourage you to visit the Furthermore website and to learn more about how to apply for a grant for a book being published and how to apply for the Alice. The application for the Alice is open from January 1st to April 1st. Furthermore grants are given twice a year with applications deadlines March 1 and September 1. In closing, let us all salute Joan Davidson for her vision and passion and for supporting the well-designed illustrated book. In her words, a work of art in its own right. To Joan.
So, Joan, you want to give the final toast?
Excelsior!
Bravo! Bravo!
Okay, greetings from Deptford in southeast London. That's the place of Christopher Marlowe's Last Jug of Ale and the most notorious gig the Sultans of Swing ever did. My name's Tristan Delancey. I am the head of illustrated reference at Thames and Hudson in the UK. We are the co-publishers of Strata, and I'm delighted to be able to talk about the book and how it was put together with a very talented team of individuals.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert McFarlane. I'm a writer and an academic with a particular interest in people and place and landscape. And I wrote the foreword to Strata. I'm speaking to you from South Cambridge, and I am on 99 million year old Upper Cretaceous chalk, which shows up as green in William Smith's wonderful 1815 geological map, which is the subject of Strata and what we're here to celebrate today. So, Tristan, could you take our listeners into this book, into the idea for it, what it celebrates, and how you approached it and defined it when you first dreamed this book into being?
Okay, well, start with the obvious, which is we are an illustrated art publisher. We publish across a variety of disciplines. And I've been working with the idea of enhancing facsimiles. So bringing new to the old and repositioning the old. Obviously, when I came across William Smith's, the delineation map, the 15-plate map, I was blown away. I saw that for the first time at the Geological Society. I'm sure Robert saw the same at some point.
Yep.
And was really blown away by the scale, the detail, and then putting into context, this is the birth of the Industrial Revolution, and we are, for the first time, looking at a very, very exciting map where what lies beneath the ground is suddenly something that can be mined for technology and for use and even for wealth. So that's sort of how we started. Now the book, because William Smith was such an interesting character and with so many sort of facets to what he did, we could actually almost compile the book, in a series of layers. And I do like to layer books when putting them together. So, there's the obvious. There's the 15 plate or 15 plates of the sort of main map, which can be split sort of roughly speaking and is split into four sections, four geographical sections. Between that, we had, there are the fossils which relate to each of the stratum,
yep.
Which were fossils that still exist from William Smith collected, and which are now owned by the National History Museum in London. A stack of archival materials, from documents, diaries, letters, all from the Oxford Museum of Natural History, Oxford University Museum of Natural History, and many sort of ancillary picks which help to sort of set the scene. Of course, one of the key things here is that we have 8 contributors, each and every one a specialist in one form or another of geology and sort of geological thinking. So that's sort of where we started. We almost had a sort of an embarrassment of riches, which helped us create the book. And we were guided hugely by those people throughout the making of the book. So to say it's a solo effort, absolutely not the case. We needed their specialisms, we needed what they could bring to the party. And indeed they did.
Thank you. Yeah, that's. I remember seeing Smith's map. The observant among you will have noticed that the backdrop, in my case, is in fact one of the plates from Smith's map. It's my favourite. It's the one which shows the sort of Oxfordshire Cotswold. I think of it as a parakeet. I often dream of it as the plumage of an extraordinary exotic bird that has landed in this most familiar of landscapes and brought it alive. And that's what Smith's map, though it had these very utilitarian instrumental origins, did for many people. I first saw it in the geological library here in Cambridge when I was writing a book called The Old Ways, for which this map became the end papers, in fact. So I've known it for 10, 14 years, and that first encounter was startling. It's huge, as you say. I mean, it's several square meters made up of these plates. I thought I would just read a little bit from the introduction, just to take us into the world of Smith, for those who don't know who he was or haven't met this map before, and it just might set the scene and draw us under the surface a little bit. It's clear that William Smith was a practical man, not given to melodrama or hyperbole. It's very unlikely that he ever imagined himself as an explorer or a pioneer, let alone a figure from myth. But truly, he was a terranaut, a deep-time visionary who taught himself to see down into bedrock and crust, who learned how to read what Charles Dickens once called the great stone book of Earth history, with strata its pages and fossils its words. It is remarkable, approaching miraculous, that Smith did so in the years around the end of the 18th century, when geology scarcely existed as a science, and when the biblical orthodoxy of an Earth whose age could be measured in thousands, not billions of years, was still influential. And he achieved this by means of a monumental effort, of what archaeologists sometimes refer to as ground truthing. That's to say, in Smith's case, by walking and riding the landscape in person over many years, and in this way gathering the first-hand local data that allowed him to build up his three-dimensional vision of Britain. Smith's 1815 masterpiece is certainly one of the most beautiful maps that I know, both conceptually and aesthetically. And I first saw a full-size version of it in the Earth Sciences Library at Cambridge. Encountered in person, the map is unmistakably a work of art as well as a document of record. The landscape of England has gained a fabulous plumage, become defamiliarized, made brightly strange by its allegiance to what lies beneath. Though born chiefly of a practical urgency to exploit the Earth's resources, Smith's map now exists somewhere between artwork, dreamwork, and data set. It gives its readers trilobite eyes, allowing them to see back into ancient Earth history and glimpse something of how profoundly this buried past shapes the surface world. It reminds us, humblingly, of the inhumanly long periods of geological time, which extend both behind and ahead of the present moment, and which our imaginations still find so hard to grasp or to conjure. So that's a little of what astonished me and still astonishes me about Smith. And one last thought before I come back to you, Tristan, is that it took a long time for Smith to be celebrated and recognised. It's fairly well known that he was cast into a debtor's prison not long after the map was first published in 1815, unable to make his finances meet. And it took another 15, even 16 years before the geological institutions and hierarchies of the day recognized what he had done. And I love the fact that your book, this book, celebrates Smith and continues to celebrate and kind of set right that debtor's prison all these years on. So you made it under very particular circumstances in a pandemic, working with a complex team, putting together probably the most beautiful book I know, certainly the most beautiful book I've ever been involved in making. Can you tell us a bit about how on earth you did it?
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm glad you like it, Robert. I would say, first of all, we set the book up very well, and this was immediately before the pandemic. I've been going through some emails actually yesterday, just to relive how the thing sort of kicked off. We were lucky to have, once we'd set on the idea of doing the treatment to William Smith and the maps, we engaged Peter Wigley, and Peter Wigley runs a website called stratasmith.com, and he re-engages with some of this work, and by re-engaging with it, he's able to provide new data and raw data from the illustrations of, for example, the local maps, the county maps.
Yeah.
And we were able to work with that information. But pulling together, so he was able to give us or recommend to us 8 very worthy contributors, who each of whom could offer something different to the book. So, for example, we have the Natural History Museum, and they were able to, so a couple of writers there who were able to give us something to be able to talk very knowledgeably about, for example, the fossils. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the pictorial content, most of it came from Oxford University Museum of Natural History, particularly the source map. And it was upon receiving the source map, I think, that's when we went into full UK lockdown. And what we got, so I'd already seen the actual book, and we were tempted by it because of the colour. The colour of the Oxford map, first and foremost, is the most vivid of any that I had seen. There are about 8 in and around public collections. This one was so vibrant because it was bound, folded, possibly too many times, but placed into a volume and put away. It was never shown to the public. It was available throughout. It was available for people to maybe peruse, experts interested in particular things, but it was never available for the general public to go and see. So the colours, therefore, had retained an amazing vibrancy, and they're really quite lurid. So obviously, being a kid in a sweet shop, I was rather tempted by that. But we did have to overcome some problems. Now, what we did really want to do was to rephotograph everything, which would have meant unbinding it, rephotographing. That was not possible given the circumstances that we found ourselves in. So one of the main things we had to do was to stitch together scans, and it could only be scanned in sections. So there were effectively 3 per main plate that then needed stitching together. Plus there were the usual wobbles, etc. But we had to be absolutely strict with the X and Y coordinates, because obviously the map needed to make sense and pass the approvals of a very strict set of people working on the book. So that was a huge game that we played. A lot was done between myself and the Repro House to stitch it together as seamlessly as possible. Now, how far is too far? These are the dark arts of the modern era, i.e. Photoshop. You can obviously pull things too far and make them rinse them clean or almost bleach them. Now, we didn't want to do that, but at the same time, we wanted to join the thing together. When you get to page 4 of the book, so very, very early on, you'll see the full thing in its stitched together glory, which is how it was intended to be shown. But what I found really interesting, and there were certain anomalies whereby we couldn't go all the way, the watercolor washes. So because we're looking at 15 plates, the watercolor washes, which took, they took days, they took weeks to complete. On one week, you'd be working on plate 4, your watercolorist would have been working on plate 4, another week, plate 9. So the yellows, for example, didn't stitch together seamlessly. And we left that because we thought, well, that is, the mix of ink was different. We wanted to keep it.
That's the maker's mark, right?
As pure as possible.
An artifact of the time and means of the making.
Sure. We did balance out, obviously, the papers itself. But, that's that is literally, that's just the making of, the main sort of cut and thrust of the book, which is, this 1815 wonder map. There are many more, there's so much more in this book. For me, my personal favorite would be the sections, which are the large panoramics that they're a kind of crowd pleaser for all, I think, where you really get a cake slice of the country, or various cake slices. Yeah. And then I think, we were able to, so Peter Wigley, again, providing us with raw data, it allowed us to render into bar graphs the breakdown of the strata. And that was new. And I think one thing I like to do is to slightly unsettle people, whereby, you've got a book that looks as if it's a sort of, it looks historical, yes, it's got a modern design. There's fact, this could be old published and known fact, but there's also new fact. But the way that you combine it slightly bamboozles people into, or it lulls them into a sort of a sense of sort of false security, whereby they're not entirely sure whether what they're looking at is truly historic, or whether it could only have been done with the modern eye and modern science. And I think that's what makes it such a sort of curious blend of sort of past and present.
There's one detail I love, which is that the title Strata on the cover and elsewhere has a full stop after it, a punctum. And I remember emailing Jane and saying, yeah, it's looking fantastic, but I think someone's forgotten to take the full stop out. And Jane wrote very kindly back, because I really should have known better, to say that this, well, you explain why it's there.
Okay, so that is taking the conceit, some would say, too far. But certainly in the era, this is the era of full stops after everything, or full points after everything. And, trawling through for an editor, I can only apologize. And I think that was either Jane Lang or indeed Isabel Jessup, who would have been trawling through just to ensure that every single full stop had been added to each title throughout. So we did carry it through to your name, Robert. I apologise for that.
No. I was delighted to see this commitment to orthography and punctuation of its time. But I think that it's a good example, especially on the cover, as it were. It's a good, bold example. And I think when it was released was about the same time that the new Autumn de Wilde film of Emma, of Jane Austen's Emma, came out. And I remember seeing that around the same time on the adverts. And that also has a full stop after Emma. So there's a period detail in the period point right there. So
I was going to say we're on the same wavelength, because Emma, so obviously I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, I'm sure you are, was also written in 1815. And that particular version of the film is incredibly bright and lurid, and it almost felt like a vindication that we had picked the brightest map available thanks to Oxford, and it felt like the two paired together very nicely, kind of old and new, symbiotically aligned.
Well, it did feel like that. Time is running on with us, but I thought I might just end by saying a few words about that. We began in the past, the deep past. We've moved to the present with Emma and this book coming out, and I thought I would just say a couple of words about ways in which this book is very sort of futurological as well. we live in a geological epoch which is being increasingly referred to as the Anthropocene, the age of humans, or technically the age of man. That hasn't yet been endorsed by the stratigraphers, the current body that endorses a new geological epoch. But I think it soon will be. It's a much contested term. It's proposed and is likely to be endorsed because what it names is the fact that human beings have become the predominant earth-shaping species, and they will leave a legacy in the strata that will be legible for millions of years to come. There are many good political objections to this idea, including the fact that it generalizes, as it were, blame for planetary change across a species, when in fact it's arguably a system, capitalism, and certainly it's certain groups of people that are more responsible and others that are more vulnerable to these changes. But it asks a big question, which is, how will our strata be read? Smith looked back and he dated the strata from those wonderful cake slices. This was one of his great realizations, is that fossils could help us date the sequence of strata. Well, what will our fossils be? What will our future remains be if a geologist like Smith were working on our epoch millions of years hence? What would be our strata markers? Some of them would be pig bones, probably. There's a huge concentration of biomass in sheep, in pigs, in chicken, in cattle. Those will probably survive. Our cities will have become rubble. There will be radionuclides from the mass use of nuclear weapons and nuclear power arising just after the end of the Second World War. There will be absences, things that are missing, soil where it should be, species where there should be more of them. And I think so strata and their reading are, it's a kind of ethical work as well as an instrumental, a geological work. And I love the fact that in that sense, to me, Smith's map looks back at us and it asks questions of our now and of our future. So although you have made this beautiful book, which has its feet billions of years ago and much of its body in the early 19th century, I found this when I met it to be a searching book that asks questions of us now as well. So speaking in my part, I'm absolutely thrilled to see your work and the work of all those involved in Strata celebrated by this award. And I'll just hand over to you for any final thoughts, Tristram, but many, many congratulations to you and your team on both sides of the Atlantic.
Well, thank you, Robert. Obviously, we were delighted that our plan A came into being, which was to ask Robert McFarlane to do the foreword. And I'm very glad that we didn't have a plan B, because you obviously jumped at the chance. To be honest, it was, we're very proud of the book. Everybody in my team, certainly across the pond at Chicago, very proud, and the contributors. You know, we absolutely could not have made this book without the excellent reputation and knowledge of the contributors. So I think really, you know, in all of this, my great thanks goes to them, and I'm glad that we were able to package it in a way that has pleased so many people, including yourself.
All right. Well, thanks everybody who's been listening, and goodbye from us both.
Goodbye.